Presenting Hidden Geometry in the title page of the first folio, Part 2. Our tools. In Part 1, we looked at some of the hidden shapes and geometry in the title page. Like that video, the tools we will use are a protractor, a straight edge, the 23-letter Latin alphabet gematria values, and the Latin alphabet repeated count, as well as our brain. The row of buttons. I don't know if anybody has ever done this before, but I will count the buttons to see what they correspond to. There are 14 buttons. I believe it relates to this from the Merry Wives of Windsor. In Act 3, Scene 2, the host says, "What say you to young Master Fenton? He capers, he dances, he has eyes of youth. He writes verses, he speaks holiday, he smells April and May. He will carry it, 'tis in his buttons, he will carry it." I believe "'tis in his buttons" is a clue that the number of buttons is important. The gematria value of 14 is the letter O. Now we move on to the button lines. What I'm going to do is draw lines from the seams and embroidery alongside the buttons to see where they land up at, especially in the title block. Line 1. We are going from left to right. Line 1 goes straight through the second L in William, clips the uppercase P in Shakespeare, goes between the I and the E in comedies, goes through the I in histories, goes along the left-hand arm of the D in tragedies, and clips the uppercase T in true. Line 2. This line goes straight between the two L's, or the L and the I in William, pardon me, clips the second E in Shakespeare's, goes straight through the E in comedies, goes between the I and the E in the histories following the left hand upright of the E, clips the D in tragedies, and goes straight through the lowercase r in true. This line goes straight through the second I in William, through the second E in Shakespeare, between the E and the S in comedies, goes through the E in histories, goes through the I in tragedies, and goes straight through the middle of the U in true. Line 4. This line goes between the I and the A in William, goes through the second E in Shakespeare's, through the S in comedies, or yes, between the E and the S in histories, between the I and the E in tragedies, and straight through the middle of the E in true. Line 5. This line goes straight along the left-hand upright in William, between the E and the A in Shakespeare's, clips the second E in tragedies, and clips the O in original. Line 6. This one goes straight through the middle of the M in William, clips the second A in Shakespeare's, clips the S in tragedies, and goes straight through the R in original. The gematria value for the R is 17. The gematria value for M in William is 12. But in Greek and Hebrew gematria, the value for M is 40. Therefore, in this line, we have 17/40 illusion. Notice that the S in tragedies is farther away from the other letters. The arrow points to the gap. That means the S was not meant to be included in this sightline. Line 7. This is the button line, going straight through the buttons. In the Droeshout engraving, it has 4 anchor points. Top to bottom, they are the right-hand corner of the right eye, his left eye, our right eye. The junction between the collar seam and the edge of the collar. It clips the top button and it goes straight through the middle of the second button. Therefore, we have enough anchor points to show that this line is probably what we are supposed to look for. This line goes straight through the A in William, clips the second E in Shakespeare's, goes between the S and the comma in comedies, goes through the S in history, goes along the right or left hand upright in tragedies, and goes straight between the E and the O in true original. I believe this gap is important between true and original. I base it on the spaces between published according to the true. As you can see, the gap between true and original is far narrower than it is for the previous words. So let's take a gematria sum of the O and the C in original copies. O is 14. C is 3. That gives us a gematria sum of 17. The P in published is 15. The T in true is 19. That gematria sum is 34. When we add these gematria values, we get 51. 17 times 3. When we add the number of lowercase letters in this line, notice that according could easily have been in an uppercase letter. We get a digit sum number. 51 plus 38 is 89. 8 plus 9 is 17. Therefore, I conclude line 7 is what we are supposed to find, because it goes straight through the uppercase A in William, through the S in tragedies, or histories rather, the E, the upright, and the E in tragedies. And now we get a gematria sum for these letters, including the O in original. A, E, S, E, O. We ignore the one for comedies because I believe the comma, the fact that the line goes through the comma and the S, separates it from the rest of this gematria sum. So A, E, S, E, O has a gematria sum total of 43, which is VV in the Latin alphabet repeated count. Again, line 7 is what we are meant to find. Next, we look at the embroidery lines. These are going to be in the left-hand panel of the doublet, the ones that are not yet been looked at. These two lines here. As you can see, the left-hand line goes directly through the uppercase P in published and splits the left-hand upright from the rest of the uppercase H. The right-hand embroidery line goes straight through the middle of the uppercase H in Shakespeare. And straight through the lowercase u in published. Now we have the collar lines. For the longest time, I asked myself, why did Droeshout make these seams so wide? I believe we are supposed to make lines and sight lines extending from those lines to the edges of the page. Like so. The left-hand collar line goes straight between the two L's in William. The P in Shakespeare. Straight through the I in comedies. Goes directly between the R and the I in histories. Follows the upright arm of the D in tragedies. Clips the T in true. Goes alongside the first O in London. And most importantly, it goes directly through the first G in jagged. I believe that is an allusion to God's hand in the creation of the first folio and the plays. The right-hand collar line is more interesting. The line clips the uppercase R in Shakespeare. It clips the right-hand side of the ampersand. It goes straight through the I in original, the second I. Clips the first O in London. And goes between the C and the I in Isaac jagged. When we look at it in an enlarged view, we can see that there's something interesting going on. The C and the I, which are touched by the line, are a homophone for C, meaning to look, and I, the first person pronoun. The fact that it goes right beside the letter O leads me to suspect that we are to make a sentence or a phrase out of this. C-I-O. The line goes straight through the second I in original. And the gematria value for the first letter that it goes through, or the last letter, depending on how you look at it, the R is 17. In between those, we have an ampersand. I believe we're to make another phrase out of these three connections. I am also 17. So much for the collar lines. Now we put them together in both collar lines. Let's look at this a bit more, where they cross and separate at the bottom of the page. Let's measure the angle that they are separated by. We're going to use the right-hand line as our baseline. And then we're going to put the protractor over top of it. Notice that the lines make an unusual angle. (170°). If we do a gematria sum of all the letters that are touched or inside of these collar lines when they cross, we get 228. If we add the number of trapped letters in between these lines, the result is 255. 17 times 15. Now I present to you the monogram lines. In the first video, we saw how the point of the spearhead in the doublet connects at the lowercase a in Jaggard, but it encompasses the O in London. At least it clips through it. A similar thing happens when we combine the two collar lines. Therefore, I conclude that these are two lines describing a hidden monogram, O and V, or V and O. Now I'm going to present something in plain sight. Something is hidden here in this button line, the first far left button line. We thicken the line to get the handle of a mask. Which you will never forget. Thanks to the hint here. So what's the big deal? We've gone through two little videos describing some of the anomalies in the Droeshout engraving in the title page. We're going to summarize. We have 14 buttons, which is equal to the letter O in gematria. We have 2 monogram lines, OV and VO. We have a spearhead made by the left-hand doublet panel, which is actually the back of the panel to our right. In fact, it describes 2 left arms. We have the double V and the jagged line, in which the line goes straight through the comma next to jagged. We have mirrored arm line angles, 54 degrees for the left-hand arm, 45 degrees for the right-hand arm. We have 4 different left-hand arm lines that connect through specific points in the doublet and the collar ruff. We have 4 corresponding lines from the right-hand side of the doublet. We can make 4 line pairs out of all these lines. When combined with the outer arm side lines, we get a big X. Inside this X is a hidden double V that's upright and another hidden double V upside down. In an example of the tria sunt omnia principle, we have at least 3 different ways to get V, V, V out of lines on the Droeshout. The one on the left shows the V made by the philtrum in the upper lip, the second line in the collar, the actual doublet collar, and then the V made by the doublet panel terminating in a spearhead point. The one on the right has the 2 collar V's plus the spearhead point. A third one would have the upper left philtrum and the 2 V's on the collar. The right-hand collar line seems to say CIO, and I am also 17. Finally, in plain sight, by thickening the far left button line to the width of the collar seam in the collar ruff, we get the handle of a mask. So, what do all these clues come to? 14 buttons equals letter O, as the host says in The Merry Wives of Windsor, "'Tis in his buttons, 'tis in his buttons." We also have the letter V. We also have triple V at least 3 times. And we have the number 17 appearing frequently either as its own number or multiples of the same. This all is more evidence that Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, was Shakespeare. Don't miss Hidden Geometry in the first folio title page, Part 3. Stay safe.